Hello, everyone. I am thrilled to have my friend and colleague, Christie Catan, co-founder of Tales of Connection, on the show. So welcome to the show, Christie.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
I know, I'm so excited. We recently did an Instagram live, and you and I can talk forever.
Yes, we could. So this will be interesting to see if we can keep this tighter.
Exactly. So Christie is a certified professional dog trainer, knowledge assessed. She is the co-founder, like I mentioned, of Tales of Connection, which is a super cool project and online community. And we'll talk about that at the end of the show. And provides private training and group training to pet parents in the DC area through Dog Trained. She is a lover of nature and pancakes. I love that. And gets curious and excited about all sorts of things. And I can attest to that, knowing you for a short period of time. Curious and excitable.
Yep, that is. And I shouldn't be surprised that I raise dogs who have some similar traits.
The weird parallels that we experience.
Yep.
So Christie and I met on Instagram, which is a funny thing to say, but I guess in today's virtual world, especially during COVID, maybe it's more normal than I think. Like maybe I'm too old or something.
I think it's super normal. I still think it sometimes sounds funny coming out of the mouth, but I think it is normal.
So normal. And the reason why we connected is that I just fell in love with her business that she co-created with her partner, Jessica Jurgen. And it provides tools, resources, and most importantly, what I really gravitated towards was the community element, helping dog owners and pet parents bond and build connection with their dogs themselves and others through dog training. So this is like so up my alley, and why I reached out to Christie to be like, thank you for doing this in the world. So, when we were on I reached out and said, can we hop on a call? And when we were on the phone, you said something so impactful to me that I actually carry around with me every day.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So thank you. What such a gift. And I thought it would be such a great conversation for our listeners. You said to me, I don't even remember what we were talking about. Maybe it was just that you say it to yourself. You said, all of it belongs. And I'll say that again, because I kind of get goosebumps when I say it. All of it belongs. So can you share with our listeners, like, what does that mean? And how did you develop that? Like, what was the impetus behind this, like, really powerful statement?
Yeah, well, I will start by saying thank you for reaching out to me, because it is such a treat to just have somebody reach out and say, hey, let's chat, right? So what a cool thing. And excited to now get to be here talking to you about this. But so I think context that's probably important for people is I chat with myself. I just have little things that I will say to myself. And all of it belongs is one of those ones that for me, it's a space creator. It's a way of calming my own nervous system a little bit, right? And bringing some grounding to wherever I am. It really is, I guess you kind of have to know a little bit of context about who I am. I am what I refer to myself as a recovering perfectionist. And historically, we're in good company here.
Yep.
Historically have been somebody who repressed a lot of emotions, right? If you would ask people I grew up with, they would not have said like, oh, that Christie, she's like really in her feelings. They would have said like, she's just a really driven, successful person. Like she just goes after things, she can do them. And really couldn't have named emotions other than like two, right? 2 or 3. Mm-hmm. I think as I aged and life hit me with some blows, right? Some of them being some pretty tough illnesses when it was in and out of the hospital for 2 years in college and kind of lingered with some chronic stuff after that left me with, I'm very open about this, that like left me with, diagnosed PTSD, panic disorders, depression, anxiety. I now really only have generalized anxiety, but it has been sort of this journey of remembering and coming home to myself. And my life with dogs has been wrapped all up in this journey, right? Like I can't separate them. Those two are connected so tightly together. But the all of it belongs for me is this remembering that life isn't just the cherry picked, happy, good, comfortable, right? It's all of it. It's not the only side that I'm allowed to show the world is this perfect picture, right? I can claim all of it as belonging, right? And I can allow it, all of it, to exist in others, right? Like my dog is allowed to do and be those things, right? So there's something about this that just helps me remember that all of it belongs, right? I don't mean it to mean that I have to like all of it either, right? There's a distinction for me. There are plenty of things that I do feel like I am actively working on shifting some of my right behaviors and how I show up, but I can do that while still holding some space and compassion for what is, right? Before I start moving to trying to change anything. Because I'm sure you can relate to this, the thing that I have discovered is it's not the anger or the sadness, right? Or the feeling like an outsider that is actually the most uncomfortable thing. It's the resistance to it that is, right? It's the hiding it. It's the fighting it. So by saying all of it belongs for me, it's just this reminder that all of this is a part of me, is a part of life. And I need to see it first, right? And let it be before I go trying to shapeshift or change, right? So I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, no, it totally does. And it reminds me of what we were talking about earlier about in our profession, whether we are expected by our clients or whether we are like society tells us, or whether it is just something that we think we should be doing as trainers and behavior consultants, we go in to fix. Yep. It's like there's something uncomfortable happening in the home. Fill in the blank behavior, right? Dog is growling at kids. Dog has bitten the owner over resources. Dog is barking and lunging and person cannot walk, right? So there's something there that is uncomfortable. And we are sort of asked to come in and quote unquote fix it, right? And so I think what is really why I like this statement is that in order for us to actually have creative solutions about fixing things, we have to first feel it.
Yes.
We have to first yes, that is so scary that the dog is growling at the child. Like, I hear you. And, say more about how that impacts your relationship when the dog escalates to biting over the resource, right? Like, I think sitting in that, and we don't have to sit there long, we really don't. It's fascinating. Like yesterday, I was in such a place where I was being very hard on myself, and I was like, wow, no wonder I feel like crap. Like I was picking on myself all day yesterday.
Yeah.
And I just sat with it for 5 minutes, let out a cry. And then my whole day was totally the trajectory was so different. And so I don't think we need to get stuck. I think we actually get stuck when we resist, like you said.
Yes. The resistance can last for years. I can't remember the exact thing, the exact number. So people can fact check this, but I think that the lifespan of an emotion is something like 90 seconds. It might be a tiny bit more, but it's actually very short.
Interesting.
If you actually fact check me on this, but it's not 3 years, which is what I would tell you if you actually asked, right?
Totally.
Because that's how long I've been battling some of these things. And the second that the moment that it shows up, allow myself to feel it, I'm angry at my dog.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. All of it belongs. I'm human. I get angry. Now that doesn't mean that I lash out, but it means I can pause. Anger is not inherently bad, right? Anger actually serves us. And if we let it be there, and I'll often to anger, I choose wonder in response to anger, because It's not one that I feel super comfortable with. Like I grew up in the South, and you're supposed to be a good, nice girl. And anger doesn't fit in that picture. So it has been one of those ones where when I feel it pop up, I try to say like, wow, that was a strong response, body. I feel you. You know, if I can first just feel wonder over how quickly I can have that sort of anger response, the anger response softens. Like it just does. I don't have to fix it. And then I will very quickly realize it doesn't actually take long for me to then go a couple layers below and realize, oh, I'm not angry at my dog. It's some narrative that I have that has absolutely nothing to do with my dog. But the only way I got there was allowing the anger to belong.
Yep. It's like what we interviewed Emily Nagoski of Burnout. And she was talking about like that, you know, you've got to go through the emotion and, you know, getting to the other side.
News ever. But like, yes.
Totally. For a lot of people, it is. And it's so funny. Like, I appreciate you bringing up that resistance as to like, that's really the big barrier, right? That is just feeling the resistance. Ooh, I don't want to feel anger. I shouldn't be frustrated with my dog because I'm a positive reinforcement trainer and I should be positive all the time. Like, I mean, it's just like, I love that you said you're a human being. You have a nervous system, right? Yep. It will go over threshold the same way that our dog's nervous system will go over threshold, right? Like, and it's okay, right? All of that belongs. I think you made a comment that I want to point out. You're not just saying all of it belongs, and then therefore I can lash out at my dog, or I can lash out at my friend. Very different. You say all of it belongs, and I'm going to make a choice to feel it on my own in a safe space, and then make a different choice. And newsflash, I feel like the resistance actually winds up making us lash out even more. Do you know what I'm saying? Which is like counterintuitive.
Oh, yes. Yes. It is counterintuitive until we start to live it, right? Like it is, honestly, if there was a cheat code to be had, I'd have found it by now, because like, I do not want to go through. My like natural response is like, I want to opt out. I don't want to feel these things, right? So it has been a deep, or I guess the word is steep, learning curve for me, trying to choose through instead of out, around, over, like anything other than through. And like the only thing that I don't, and to be fair, like I just think it's important for me to be honest about this. Do I always pick through? No. There are some days where I intentionally don't pick through, where I look and say, I can't, right? Either this situation isn't going to allow me the space I need to feel this. I don't have the 90 seconds to put my hand here. It doesn't usually actually take me full 90 seconds to move through something now, but I don't feel safe right here, right? So I'm going to pick some other survival tactic that I've got, and I will feel it later, right? When I feel safe. So I think there's a lot of, just like everything in life, there's nuances. It's not that you always must feel everything the moment that it shows up, but at least in my experience, the path to less anger has been through anger, which sounds super counterintuitive. But as soon as I stop being afraid of, it's the thing that actually I don't like is the resistance to the anger, right? The anger isn't all that uncomfortable once I feel it. It's the other thing that I don't think we also account for, which is, to me, I think perhaps as somebody who works a lot with dog behavior, fascinating, is watching the reinforcement history get built and the habit get built around allowing myself to feel, right? Allowing whatever pops up to belong first, and then making a choice about where I want my attention to go. And that is, if you had told me that I would be able to do that, honestly, even a year and a half ago, I would have laughed in your face. Said, no, there is not a shot in this world. If I lean into that feeling, I will have a panic attack. That is what will happen. And it is, in fact, not what will happen. So walks with my dogs now actually have become a way of practicing a lot of these things, a lot of these tools and skills that I've built up in just some of my own journey through therapy, through reading, right, just all the ways that we start to gain information and grow. I've put it into practice first, usually in walks with my dog, because it was too overwhelming to me to just try to apply it to my whole life. How do I shift everything that I was doing before and now show up in the world totally differently? And, the walk for me was this very specific moment in time where I could be really intentional about how I wanted to show up there. And, some of these phrases that I now only have to say in response to ways that I'm responding used to be things that I said nonstop in the walk. Ideally in my head, but I'm sure I certainly said some of them out loud as I was walking, right? But just as a way of grounding me a little bit in my walk so that I had some sort of attention I had my attention a little bit where I wanted it. And then because dogs are who they are and relationships do what they do, right? Relationships will inherently surface things for us, right? That's just, we are social creatures, and all of our stories are going to get exposed in relationships that we have. And that's, to me, one of the ways that dogs are so powerful in their just teaching capacity is they will, just like a person, raise things up for us, but often in a relationship that feels really safe, right, with a dog, whereas sometimes it can feel really vulnerable or scary with people, right? I got to practice with my dogs with, let's say my dog blew up and barked at something. This is an actual story. Blew up, barked. I immediately felt a surge of tension in my body. I felt heat everywhere. And for me, that is the first thing I notice. It's easier for me to sense a body change than it is for me to sense a thought. And so I can tell, something happened. I can say all of it belongs. And I will say it thinking about myself. And then I will say it thinking about my dog, right? So then I will try to think for a second and say, okay, I feel a lot of tension in my chest. My throat feels tight. I feel heat in my head. And I let myself feel it. That's the way. I don't even have a label on it yet. And then under that, I'm like, okay, what's happening? What's here right now? And I can say, I'm really mad that Otis barked. Okay, why am I mad that Otis barked? Well, I don't think he should have barked. Okay, why do I not think he should have barked? Well, he needs to just be good and like everybody and get along with everybody, right? That's very quickly now, that's my story. And I felt like my tension was visible to him. There's just no way you could not visibly notice what happened. And so even after that, I could be kind to myself. I could feel it for a second and say, wow, Christy, that's hard, right? That's a lot of a story that has been fed to you. And that's a lot to feel, right? So I can be kind to myself first. And then I can say, that's not my story, right? And I could even, oftentimes I would practice looking at Otis, or, it could have been Sully because she's very capable of blowing up too. Looking at Otis and saying, you're allowed to feel that. I'm sorry that I got upset with you. It has nothing to do with you, right? And that's me practicing a skill that I now use all the time with people, saying, ooh, I don't love how I showed up. Yeah, right? That was not something that felt comfortable to me before. And I got more comfortable with it talking out loud to my dogs before I ever started really applying this genuinely to people, right? Where it's not some situation that's a forced apology, but where it is almost an immediate recognition of, ooh, I don't love how I showed up. I'm really sorry about that, right?
Yeah.
And that can feel very scary.
Yeah, I love how you gave everyone a tangible example about taking something, this concept that is simple, and yet trying to integrate it into your life is daunting, right? And so so daunting, right? And I will say too, this is my experience about when you start to really become your own personal observer.
Yeah.
Woo, there are some things that I don't care to admit that I am observing. And I think that can be overwhelming for folks, right? So if people are listening and they're like, I want to practice this, like, be kind to yourself and offer yourself. This is my Post-it. I have mercy and grace, right? Like all the time.
You have so many good Post-its.
Oh, I do have like a ton of Post-its right here.
I love that.
But I think because it can be challenging, and I gotta say, when another being, whether it's your mom or your cousin or your partner or your colleague or your dog, elicits your stuff.
Yep.
Gosh, like I had one friend say to me, "Oh, I'm worried that I might resent my dog." And I'm like, "Ooh, that's super interesting." Like the same way that we resent our friends or our family for making us, quote unquote, feel uncomfortable, right? And hey, that belongs too. Yep. And get curious about that. Like, is that really true? Or does it have to do with the dog, or does it have to do with just like, this feeling's uncomfortable and overwhelming and I'm not used to feeling it, and they told me to go through, and I'm just actually not I don't have the capacity today to do that. Right. So
what an amazing thing that person even voiced out loud that they were worried that they resented their dog, because they're not alone. Right. Yep. That is, it is hard to say those things, because for so many people, it brings up shame. And so by simply allowing that worry, that resentment to belong, it doesn't necessarily mean it's true. It's choosing, saying it can be here. I am a human. I am allowed to worry. I am allowed to resent, right? Like you now get to make a choice from there about what you want to do with it. But it is just, I have noticed with myself and with so many other people too, that when we kind of live from this place of all of it belonging, it creates this safety for not just ourselves, but for other people, right? Like we can have somebody tell us that didn't sit right with me, right? Like, not assume, not necessarily bring our whole narrative. We can hear that, put our hand to our heart and say, ooh, I'm uncomfortable right now. Like I feel really embarrassed. I feel really, I might feel really defensive, right? And just feel it for a second and know that that's allowed, right? You're allowed to feel those things, and now choose to do something with your attention, right? Now choose to work right through that and show up the way you want to show up for that person, right? Who was pretty brave in saying that. So whoever said that is, I'm always in awe of people who say things that are hard to say, that it's hard to say very often. And it gives people permission. It's like, yes, these dogs are absolutely incredible. And that is that narrative. I obviously love dogs. I'm obsessed with dogs. It doesn't mean that dogs aren't hard. It doesn't mean that I don't get frustrated. It doesn't mean that I don't get angry. I'm human. That doesn't change just when I'm with a dog.
Yeah. And I think too, the parallel and the visual I keep thinking of is like, you sort of are at threshold, right? Like if you're working with a dog that barks and lunges at the sight of whatever, right? You're sort of working at thresholds, and the dog sees that stimulus, and that's the choice point, right? Like this is what we're talking about. Like we see that we're feeling resentment, or we feel the resentment. And what we're asking both dogs and ourselves to do is feel it slightly and then make a different choice, right? Like, and I think that, what a beautiful thing to watch a dog do that, right? They're like, there's that skateboarder. Okay, I'm going to disengage and do something different, right? Like that, that is so, to me, when my dog is able to do that, or when my clients' dogs are able to do that, I'm just like, yes, like you made a different choice. Like it's so celebratory. And it's the same for us, right? Where you're walking Otis and you're like, I love that you say wow so much. You're like, wow. Like I have brought so much into this particular experience right now. And like, what do I want to just let this thing take over me, or do I want to make a different choice in order to support both of us?
Yeah. Wow. Wonder. Wow. It's the antidote to spiraling for me. It might be for other people too, but it is, and I think wonder and I know you are big on curiosity, and wonder to me is very tightly knitted in with curiosity. And, you know, you could probably make an argument that you could use them interchangeably. But this idea of first allowing something to be there for a second before we change. I also really think, at least for me, and I know I've definitely talked to people who feel like this, that self-compassion did not come easily for me first, right? I was hard on myself. This is the recovering perfectionist in me, right? Who just, nobody had to, you know, I didn't get in trouble growing up. Nobody had to tell me I didn't do something, because I was already so hard on myself. Like there was no need for somebody else to come in and tell me that I maybe should have studied more. If I did less than what I could have done on a test, I already beat myself up, right? So the self-compassion muscle just wasn't super strong for me. And I actually found with Otis, so he is the dog who pushed me into becoming a trainer. I had worked with several trainers who just had never really positioned some of his behavior at all as having any connection with a fear emotion. And at some point, I think just the observer in me snapped on instead of just auto listening to people, right? And I say this with like kindness. I'm not beating myself up, but like I didn't see what I didn't know, and I didn't know, but you know, like it's the normal process. I looked at him at one point after some serious trigger stacking had happened, and said, "Oh my gosh, you're afraid. Oh, I see you, buddy. Like, I am so sorry. Let me walk with you. I'm going to get you somewhere safe." And as soon as I said it, I could feel tingles in my body. Like my body screamed, "I want to hear it." It was immediate for me that what I was saying to my dog was the exact thing I wanted to hear. And it fascinated me a little bit because I didn't know I needed it, honestly, right? Until I said it to my dog. And
so you said to your dog, like, "Hey, you're worried. You're fearful. I want to get you somewhere safe." And then you were like, "Wow, I wish someone said that to me." And I say that to myself. Oh, I love it.
And I didn't know that I wanted to hear it. If you had asked me if I was living in fear, I would have told you no. I would have been very confused by the question. And now I would tell you, "Oh yes, I live in fear."
Yeah.
Right. And I had to build, the more I practiced how I responded to him, the stronger that response muscle got. And I started to be able to just turn it just a little bit towards myself, right? It's the same response I was already building, that just, I'm just flipping it a little bit around slowly, you know, one moment at a time.
Which is what we do with training and building behavior habits with dogs. Right. And so, gosh,
it's remarkable how many overlaps there are.
So many parallels. Speaking of parallels, I do want to tell our listeners that, one, I also came out of the womb that way, like super hard on myself, like constant straight A's, achievement oriented. You and I both have very similar loves of why we're in this industry. Like we were talking about it. We're not here because we want to train the next agility dog or whatever, but we're here because we're like, gosh, there is so much richness in the parallels and so much of it's not really about training necessarily. It's about like the connection with our dogs. And then lastly, we both have dogs named Sully. I'm sorry. Like the listeners need to know that
it's important. It is a critical piece of information in understanding the story.
The parallels are just amazing. So, my heart goes out to you when you're talking about like the self-talk, right? That like, okay, we got to do it better. We got to do it faster or whatever. Right. And it's tied up into a million different things, our identity, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And yeah, sort of just being like, ooh, Marissa.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a big load to carry, Marissa, right?
Yeah, you're being a little rough on yourself.
That's a lot. And I don't know how to unlink our own journey from dogs, right? Like they are inextricably connected. So there is no way, in my view, to just talk about training, right? Like you can't take the human part out of it, right? Yeah. It's inherently part of it. And even just from, if you were even really talking about like really technical training, there is still a human who's going to behave based on a lot of the stories they bring. Like if a human shows up to a training session and they're petrified of making any mistakes, they're going to behave differently.
Yep. And they might get stuck because of that, right? Like we talked about that resistance in the beginning, and then they might choose to not do anything. And then therefore our behavior modification plan is sort of, we don't make the impact or we don't see the change in behavior for both parties involved. And then our impact is not what we had anticipated it would be. And so, yeah.
Well, and I will tell you a funny story about this if you want, that with my Sully, who, do you want me to tell you this story?
Yeah.
I don't want to get too far off track since we've already
prefaced the story
with, there's a chance that we could talk for too long. So I had loved this little dog since the moment I saw her with her, she had just had babies on the street. Her nipples were touching the floor. She was skin and bones, I just loved her. I don't know, something about her eyes spoke to me. And I wasn't sure if she would end up being with me, but like the way that the universe worked on those given days, right? It came to be. And it took me longer to like her than it did to love her. And I think like sometimes I say that with some trepidation around people. So it's like, oh God, you're supposed to be obsessed with your dog. Like,
oh my gosh.
I loved the crap out of this dog. But, did she bubble up everything in me? Like I was frustrated all the time.
Yeah.
And that was really uncomfortable for me, right? I was fighting so hard in my mind to help her. And was putting in just a lot of time and emotional energy trying to quote unquote help this dog. And it felt like a really loving thing that I was doing. And to not watch, there were certain things that absolutely started shifting for her, but there were other things just like, I can't win. Like what is happening? This quote unquote should be working. And there was a day, I want to say it was around a year mark of being with her, where I looked at her and said, okay, girl, I see you. I'm done. I'm not going to fix you anymore. I'm going to love you right as you are. For all of the things that drive me crazy, you don't have to change them. You just be you. And I will work with you. And if you want to change. If you don't. You do you.
Yeah.
And I am not kidding you. Like it doesn't make sense other than I could try to come up with ways that my behavior shifted.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
From that, right? But it was within 3 days, a 180 on so many of these behaviors that I couldn't put a dent in, to the extent that my partner, Ben, after about a week after that moment, said, have you noticed? Like he was noticing things.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Sully doesn't do X anymore. And I had done zero work on it. Like one of the things was if you moved near her while she was lying down, she would, she just startle and like a frenzy of growling and barking and snarling because the movement near her when she was sleeping, right?
Mm-hmm.
We tried very hard to just manage and prevent that, but I had done zero work on that in quite a while. After that moment where I just kind of allowed her to be who she was, it stopped cold.
Wow.
Completely cold. She could sleep in the bed. I'm not kidding you. I woke Ben up, panicked she was dead because my feet were kicking her and she wasn't snarling. And I shot out of bed like a rocket, assuming she had to be dead because it's the only way that she wouldn't snarl.
I don't mean to laugh. Like that's
I know,
scary.
but like, yeah. I mean, yes, my adrenaline, that was the end of sleep for that night, but like it just changed. So like it shifted fundamentally how I showed up enough that her environment changed and her behavior changed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and it's funny. I mean, I so know what you're talking about. You're like, I don't really know why, and I can't really explain it. And it's not like I used a protocol, right? Because we get really heavy duty with our training protocols.
And I like science, right?
Yeah. Right.
I'm pro science.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, gosh, you just let go of the tension. So like, who knows about the resistance and the tension that was just like living in the house that was coming out through like shorter breaths or the way in which you were talking to her. Or, I mean, it's fun. I have I have a lot of clients that have similar stories. And I'm thinking of one client where she was doing a training exercise. We were doing start button exercise to move towards something that was challenging for him. And she said, I'm not making any progress. I really feel like I'm just hitting a ceiling. And then she wound up changing her perspective on the whole process. And she's like, you know what? I'm not going to have an agenda about where I reached during this training session. Yeah. I'm just going to go out. She goes, and I don't know what happened. I actually I made it way further.
Wow.
In the training plan. I don't know what happened. And I said, okay, well, let's actually get curious about this. When you started off and you were trying and you had an agenda, how did you show up? And she's like, well, I was more tense. I didn't talk as much. I was just like really focused on marking and reinforcing. And like, there was like a tenseness and a stiffness to her. And then I said, okay, well, how did you show up when you were, when you dropped the agenda? And she was like, oh, I don't know. I think I talked to him more. I was like looser in my body.
Yeah.
I was like prepared to go back to the house if for some reason it was too much for him.
Exactly.
And gosh, just like, that's not about clicking and treating or right. That's not about a training protocol. That is absolutely about like how we're showing up impacts behavior.
Absolutely.
And so, gosh, those thoughts and story, like, I love that you just sat her down and you were like, girl, you do you. And like, I will figure my stuff out. And
I just like, I can't fight you anymore.
Yeah.
Which is what I was, even though I was in my mind helping her, I was fighting her. Right. Yeah. And I love the example you gave because I'm always I try to be really intentional about how I talk about this because it's a fundamentally different thing than blaming somebody for their dog's behavior or blaming myself. It's like, that's not at all what we are saying, right? It's your example paints this really beautifully. There was an actual training plan you were doing, but when you did it without some of the added pressure, it was very different, right? Like, so it's not either this like, magical thing about how you feel when you show up or training. It's both, right? Yeah. Like can you let go of some of that resistance, which you may not be able to let go of all of it at once, right? Like I will try sometimes with myself. Can I soften one part of my body? Can I scan and find tension somewhere and just soften one thing? And usually if I can soften one thing, I can soften the rest. But it is, it's a
small approximation
powerful thing.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. It's really sometimes frustrating how many of the things I do so fluently with dogs, and then I apply it to myself, and it's like, I should change everything at once.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, we know that that's not possible. And yet we're so conditioned to
I should
think
just
that
be
that's
able to make
real.
one choice and everything will
Yeah.
change.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that all your stories, your experiences, this mantra. I hope folks that are listening take it into their day. Like all of it belongs. All of it belongs for you and for your dog. And before we wrap it up, I do want you to talk about your awesome online course that you co-created with Juliana DeWillems of JW Dog Training, who is also on the podcast. We talked about my favorite topic, which is being an advocate for your dog. And she's going to be on season 2 as well, because I adore speaking to her. And you adore her so much that you invited her to co-create a course. Big shout out to her. Tell our listeners how stinking awesome. well, I can tell them because I actually took the course as well, but tell them about this course because it's so great.
Awesome. Well, so you are right. We are really stinking lucky to have gotten to do this with Juliana. Grateful to be in the same city as her, so that this becomes a really. So we just need you to come to the DC area. So there's kind of 2 parallel tracks with this course. So it's called Attention Unlocked. It's a video on demand course, so you can go at your own pace. You have access to all these videos. They're short, bite-sized videos. So there's nothing overwhelming about this. And it's a lot of just really simple foundation things done well and like laid out in a way that can really help you progress. So the dog training track is what Juliana does throughout this course. And what the sort of focus is on is building or really capturing attention, right? So starting in environments with your dog where your dog is naturally going to offer that attention, and then slowly building up, adding in distractions, moving to other environments, so that attention continues to be a default behavior of theirs, since we've built just such a strong reinforcement history. I personally think that this piece of dog training is just, if there's only one thing that somebody did, right, it's like, do this.
Yeah.
It's the thing that's going to help you with your walking. It's going to help you with your recall. It's going to help you with your dog being able to respond around distractions.
100%.
It's kind of it's the foundation. Mm-hmm. And then, because I think it's probably evident from just this conversation that we've had, it is impossible for me not to draw parallels to the human, right? As we're talking about dogs, mm-hmm. There is this human attention track where Dr. Natalie Edmond, who is a licensed psychologist, teaches. I think she's got 7 little video series throughout the course where she explains how our mind and body and nervous system are all linked, and talks about, human attention and how we can shift it, how we can start to notice where it goes, right? So the same time that we're thinking about helping our dogs make choices about their attention, we can also think about, we're at least inviting people to think about their own attention. They can choose to opt into that part or not, totally up to them.
Yeah. It's so awesome. I agree with you that it is like the foundation skill, right? It's like, if you're going to teach your dog anything, do that. And I loved listening to the modules about the mindfulness element. So good.
Me too. She has the most calming, soothing voice too. Yeah. It's just, as you can tell, and even in my intro, I am excitable. Like that is, I think I am drawn to calming people because that is not who I am. Yeah, like I am your person. If you need a hype person, like if you need somebody to amp you up, like I'm your girl. I am not the one who's going to drop you back down.
Yeah, no. Same. And so so her course or her modules were just so lovely to listen to. Yes. And the content is really incredible for folks to understand like what's going on in them regarding attention, and then how they can help their dogs with more attention. So it's a really cool course. I love it. And I'm super pumped that it's out in the world as an educational resource for pet parents. So thank you.
Well, thank you for reviewing it and for talking about it.
Yeah, of course. So where can listeners find you online?
So on social platforms will be at Tales of Connection, and it's spelled tail like a dog tail, so TAIL. And then website is talesofconnection.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here and for sharing all of your goodness, all of your stories, all of your insight today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's a treat to be here and talk with you anytime.
Yeah.